Good morning, everyone. While we may not all be in our places with bright, shiny faces, I believe we've got enough to have a quorum, and some days that's good enough. So if y'all will bear with me, we're about to get commercial in here. It is Tuesday, February 22nd. I'm Kevin Vaughn. I'll be your host this morning as we look at a fairly big calendar in front of us today in the House Commerce Committee. But before we get started, I believe we need to have our roll called by our clerk. Mr. Clerk, could you please take the roll? Here. 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 On board. Powers. Here. Sparks. Here. Thompson. Here. Towns. Bible. Here. Zachary. Here. Vice Chairman Rickett. Here. Chairman Vaughn. I too am here. All righty. Thank you very much. Before we get started doing the people's business, do we have any personal orders this morning? Any personal orders from members of our committee? It seems as if we are going to do nothing personal, only official business today. So we will get started with our calendar. Our first item is House Bill 2175, and I believe Representative Sparks is standing by. You are in the proper posture, Representative Sparks.
Thank you.
Please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Chairman. House Bill 2175 just clarifies some ambiguous language dealing with elevators. I appreciate your support.
We've got a question. I appreciate your brevity, bill sponsor.
Yes.
So therefore, I have heard the question called. All those in favor of moving 2175 on to calendar and rules, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any noes? Hearing none, you're off the calendar and rules.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right. Next up, we've got House Bill 2176. I believe our sponsor today is Representative Campbell. All righty. We've got a motion and a second. Mr. Sponsor, please share with us about 2176.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, I'm really thankful that I didn't have the previous bill regarding an elevator, because they would have asked Scotty to beam them up. And quite frankly, that gets a little mundane after a while. House Bill 2176 amends a law passed last year, the Tennessee Registered Apprenticeship Program Act. This is an administration bill. It removes the specific youth apprenticeship category references as required by the United States Department of Labor as a part of the path to becoming a state apprenticeship agency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Do we have any questions of the sponsor? We hear the question called for the bill. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, you are off to calendar and rules.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Campbell. Next up, House Bill 1713 by Speaker Marsh. Speaker Marsh, it's great to see you this morning.
Proud to be here.
You are in proper posture, sir. Please tell us about our bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill comes to us from the Comptroller's Office, and this bill makes government work better by allowing the Utility Management Review Board, the UMRB, to initiate either a consolidation or a merger among utility districts that benefit the ratepayers of a financially distressed district. Before the UMRB can finalize the merger, a feasibility study must be completed that recommends the merger. A public hearing shall be conducted in the financially distressed district, and the UMRB must make a determination that the merger is in the best interest of the ratepayers. Furthermore, this bill clarifies that the Utility District Revitalization Fund can be used to mitigate short-term financial impacts from the board-initiated consolidation or merger. With that, I'll answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Do we have any questions of the sponsor? All right. First off, let me say, Speaker Marsh, we still, in business and utilities, we still fly in the missing man formation because your presence is so missed there. Just wanted to let you know that. The other item that I would like to bring up is I found this bill to be very interesting and particularly in light of some of the hearings we had about the wastewater board and the utility districts. One of my concerns with this in the past has been why are investor-owned utilities not called out? If we've got distressed utilities, why are investor-owned utilities not an option for the takeover of a distressed utility? And I think that what we have figured out is that before we can do that, we've got a little bit of work to do by prescribing how that would even happen. The utility districts basically are very interesting entities that provided a great service when they were to bring utilities to rural areas and underserved areas, but as a result, their ownership presents issues with regards to that. And so I think that's rather than create noise around a bill that is meant to provide the comptroller's office a way to satisfy dealing with issues for these 30, I believe there's almost 30 utility districts that are distressed throughout our state, then I personally decided that I thought it was better for us to tackle that another day rather than get in the way of the resolution of these issues. But I think the fact that we do see that we have 30 of these districts that are in financially distressed condition right now points to us. I fully support your bill and appreciate you resolving this problem for folks. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, with respect to something the chairman said, it piqued my interest in terms of whether this bill would, in some kind of way, mandate this type of merger, or are we just given the authority to consider a merger? So what is the limits of this bill as it pertains to merger?
Speaker Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does not mandate it. If you have one district that's distressed and maybe going broke, and you got another one that's doing good over here, they both have to agree to do it. If the good one doesn't want to take the bad one, they don't have to. So there's ratepayers input. There's a feasibility study. All kind of studies. It's not mandated. It's just whatever's best for the ratepayers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Leader. With that conversation, anybody else have any further questions with regards to this subject matter today? Seeing none, I believe I'm going to entertain the question. All those in favor of moving House Bill, 1713 on to finance, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. You're off to finance, Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
It's always good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you. I miss you. Like you said, I miss you too.
We are going to roll House Bill 2352 to the heel of today's calendar. I believe that bill sponsor has duties pending elsewhere in the building. I do not see our sponsor for House Bill 2315. Well, there's a demerit for, let's see, we're going to roll House Bill 2315 to the heel. Representative Smith. Hey, we've got a participant.
Staying power
All
means
righty.
something, right?
Let's see. We're here to discuss House Bill 2587. We've got a motion and a second. Please share with us what we're going to be talking about today.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. It pays to hang around here, right? This is a local bill. It's permissive for an event that occurs every year in Chattanooga. It is anyone who sells more than 5 motor vehicles in 1 year is required to be licensed through the Motor Vehicle Commission. And this gives a temporary piece of legislation to enable a festival for a motor car festival. This is the third year. This past year in Hamilton County, it generated almost $17 million of revenue for the city, county, and the state as far as ECD development. But for a specific charity, and I know I saw that Janelle Riley was here earlier for Memorial Hospital, a neuroscience center or a stroke treatment center, it has generated more than $300,000 every year. And we hope that now that we're post-pandemic, we're going to get in a position to raise a little more money for stroke research. And with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to renew my motion, but happy to take questions, sir.
All righty. Thank you very much. Anytime somebody talks about having a festival, count us in. We're glad to support.
noted.
Any questions about the festival? Question on the bill. Hearing the question, we're calling it. All those in favor of House Bill 2587, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Off to calendar and rules you go, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
Next up, Chairman Faison with House Bill 1904. We got a motion and a second. You are in proper posture, sir. Please share with us what you're set out to accomplish today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, this legislation would allow sterilizers that have been designed to meet the intent of the Tennessee Boiler Code to be installed in medical facilities with reduced or zero clearance depending on the manufacturer's recommendation.
All righty. Chairman's privilege here. One moment. Would you withdraw the question? Yeah, I have a moment's hesitancy. I support your bill, Mr. Sponsor. I do indeed. But one thing that troubles me some, and I don't want us to get, I don't want this to be I don't want this to be a routine matter by which we, as a legislative body, effectively come in and overrule boards and commissions with established procedures, because I frankly don't want us to be seen as someone a body that effectively sets out to provide a way around rules and or an appellate board to commit boards and commissions. In this case, though, I understand the need for the greater good. We've discussed with the department, and y'all have gone through, as a sponsor, you've met with many people and dealt with this, and it's troubling that this is the court of last resort effectively on this issue. But it's something that I don't want to be seen as a standard way of business for folks who struggle with boards and commissions throughout our state. So I'm going to support this bill today because I've been fully briefed on it. I believe I understand what's taking place and want to provide assistance. But at the same time, I think this can't become the standard for folks who run into troubles along the way with projects, processes, or manufacturing review. And so with that little bit of sermonette, I believe I'm going to recognize Vice Chairman Bricken. Did you call the question? We have got a question on the floor. For all those in favor of House Bill 1904, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. 1904 is off the calendar and rules. So House Bill 1853 by Chairman Boyd. You're next on our agenda, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I actually have an amendment to this. I've got drafting code 013098. Is that not it?
I believe we're going to try again with that one. Might I suggest you look for 013765?
Mr. Chairman, that amendment sounds terrific. I think I'll go with that one.
I love it when the stars align. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment was brought by the Department of Labor. It just gives some clarification more for human resources purposes with regard to what documentation would need to be retained when E-Verify is used. Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions on the amendment.
Question on the amendment. We need a motion and a second on that amendment, and then we will call the question. Okay, we are now in posture. I believe I heard Representative Zachary call the question. All those in favor of 013765 being attached to Bill 1853 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now we're attached. We are ready to go on House Bill 1853 as amended. Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1853 makes various changes to the statute with regard to E-Verify. The first change, it lowers the threshold by which an employer would use E-Verify from an employer that employs 50 employees down to 25. The current statute specifies that a person should not knowingly employ, recruit, or refer for a fee an illegal alien. It would add the term rehire to that. It also provides some protections to employers. So if an employer uses E-Verify and the E-Verify fails or there's any sort of problem with it, it provides immunity to the employer. It also provides some resources to employers that do not have internet access or to employers that employ less than 50 employees. The Department of Labor has a department. It would be no additional cost because they're already providing this, but it would provide some additional support there as needed. And then it clarifies and kind of codifies a court case. And just to give you a little background, there was an employee in Tennessee that filed a workers' comp case, and after they had their medical bills paid and got rehabbed and went back to work, they were found to be illegal and their employer terminated them. They later filed suit in federal court in West Virginia claiming wrongful termination, and the court ruled basically stating that at the federal level, that you can't employ someone that's known to be illegal. But they did say in the court case that the Tennessee law was a little bit obscure about that. And so we're clearing that up to basically state that regardless if someone is illegal in Tennessee, you can't have retaliatory discharges against the employer for terminating them in that case. Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Chairman Boyd, appreciate your work on this. I was reading a report from some think tank, may have been Pew, may have been Heritage, I'm not real sure, but they issued ratings for freedom. And one of the areas that they dinged Tennessee on was our heavily reliance on E-Verify, the requirement for that. But I do understand that while we are strengthening the E-Verify requirement, you're also coupling that by resolving some issues that run concurrent with E-Verify, and so it lessens the impact in my mind of the overall system that you're looking at dealing with. One of the issues that I struggle with is and I understand that there's a concern within our populace with regards to immigration status and immigration with regards to our southern border and what's happening there. And my concern, while I do have that overarching concern, I do understand that's a federal problem, and many of us are not very happy about the federal immigration system and believe that it's in need of comprehensive immigration reform that will work better for everybody involved. I'm always hesitant because I don't want to turn Tennessee businesses into agents of the Immigration and Customs Department, to where we're constantly putting more requirements and basically relying on Tennessee businesses for enforcement actions just because the federal government's not doing their job. And so the combination of your dropping the threshold, but yet giving some relief to employers and making that aspect better, I think you walked a very thin line here and were able to accomplish something that I am happy to support. Does anybody else have any questions with regards to this bill? Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think aptly put, obviously we have some problems in the country that have to be addressed, no question about it. If you don't e-verify, what other mechanism can employers actually utilize to get that information?
Mr. Sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every employer is required to retain an I-9, but the E-Verify is kind of the gold standard and the as far as the electronic verification.
Representative Towns, you got a follow-up?
So certainly it's going to be quicker and I would imagine more efficient to accomplish that. But you said I-9, is that what you said?
Mr. Chairman.
I-9.
Okay, I-9. Now, you also stated that there may be some businesses don't have access to the internet and so forth. Like, would they, I guess they would utilize that mechanism to verify?
I believe, Representative Towns, that's the E-Verify system is you've got to have internet to be able to access it.
Right.
And so for folks who don't have that, then we're giving some relief as a result of them not having that in place. All right.
My question is how, Mr. Chairman? Is it going to be the I-9 route, the old route, or?
I'll leave that to Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, the I-9 is required of everyone. So if you employ anybody, you have to have that on file. So if you were audited, you would have to provide that. The E-Verify is just something years ago when that was implemented in Tennessee. At that time, based on the amount of or lack of readily available broadband across Tennessee, 50 was the size that was chosen. And there's been some discussions over the last few years of what it should be lowered to. And there have been some folks that have suggested it be lowered down to basically everyone, which I think most of us felt like was a bit intrusive on the business culture that we have in Tennessee, and you know, someone that perhaps is transitioning from being someone working in a business and someone that's got that entrepreneur spirit and decides to go out and start a business and only has a handful of employees, it might be a bit of a burden on them. So with some discussion and conversations with the business community, we felt like 25 was a threshold that really threaded that needle pretty good.
Share my last question.
Yes, sir.
Now, these people, obviously our industry need people to work. Okay. You can't maintain control and of your business if you don't have the labor force, obviously. And that's a problem across the country. Just say those that have green cards, how does it impact those people in that situation?
I believe green cards are appropriate identification and verification for employment, but I'll leave it to Chairman Boyd.
I think so too. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to reiterate, we're not changing employment law here. It has been and still is illegal to employ someone that's a non-citizen without the proper work visa or green card. What this does is it just in Tennessee, it's a requirement to use this E-Verify system, so it screens out more people, and it can be a very useful and convenient tool once you learn how to use it. I mean, almost every bit of technology that's used in the workforce, when used properly, can be more convenient. So we're just lowering that to 25, and we think in today's technological world that we live in, that most employers that employ 25 should have the ability to use that system.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yes, sir. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say, I continue to be against this legislation. I was against it in sub. I know that this does not go as far as some of the other legislation I've seen in this committee. So on that front, I hope that this is, a pause or an end to this continuous discussion, because I think the business community needs to have certainty in this state, and we continue to lower this threshold or look at this issue. It's placing a greater burden on businesses. So hopefully this is the final piece of legislation we'll see, and any other kind of legislation on this topic, this committee won't consider, because I think that, I disagree with the sponsor, but, I understand he has worked with some of the different parties that are interested in this to try to come up with a compromise. But I still have reservations. I think this is, again, burdensome on businesses. And at the end of the day, we should be focused, and it's not our issue, but we should be focused at the federal level and making sure we have comprehensive immigration reform to solve this issue once and for all. But thank you, Mr. Chairman and sponsor.
Yes, sir. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we're going to call the question. All those in favor of House Bill 1853, sending it to Calendar and Rules, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All righty. Noes, please let the clerk know. Please register those noes. It moves on. It did indeed pass. I'm sorry. I was busy talking to you and forgot to call the score. All right. Bill 2110. Oh, it's the Chairman Boyd show. We're going back to back. I like that. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. House Bill 2110 is the LIBOR Discontinuance and Replacement Act of 2022. So LIBOR for nearly 40 years has been the global benchmark interest rate that's been used for a lot of loans and mortgage products. And so it's actually being discontinued next year. And so what this bill will do is it'll validate all of those existing contracts that are still going to be on the books when 2023 gets here. By using a replacement interest rate. It's called the Secured Overnight Financial Rate, known as SOFR. It's a replacement interest rate, and it'll also provide safe harbor from litigation for the use of any contracts that use this benchmark replacement. Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions.
We have question on the bill. All those in favor of House Bill 2110, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Noes? The ayes have it. 2110 is on its way to Calendar and Rules. House Bill 1989, sponsored by a very learned, incredible legislative mind, is going to be rolled for 2 weeks. Yes, humble too. All righty, I see that we have been joined and graced by the presence of Representative Garrett. Please join us, Representative Garrett. We have been waiting. The anticipation is nearly about to get the best of us. So House Bill 2352, sir, the floor is yours. You are in proper posture, so let's hear about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This legislation was brought to me by the Cemetery Association, and let me kind of explain what it does real quick. Funeral homes can sell funeral arrangements on a pre-need basis. They have two ways to do that. One way is by an insurance product. The second way is that they can actually invest those funds, put them in trust. The differences between what funeral homes can do and what the cemeteries can't is the funeral homes can pool their trust funds with other funeral homes to save cost and administratively. Cemeteries can't do that. All this bill, it allows cemeteries to take advantage of what the funeral homes can do. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yes, sir. Do we have any questions for the bill sponsor? Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All the required audits will still remain in place. It's just going to provide a subset. Is that clear?
Representative Garrett.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All righty, Chairman Moon. Representative Towns.
Thank you, sir. When you say the money can be, did you say it can be put in trust? Now, while placing it in trust, are those funds being invested or they're secured or what? Talk about that a little bit for me.
Sure.
So I understand it a little better, please.
Mr. Sponsor.
Absolutely. Today's prices are a whole lot better than 20 years down the road. So you can put your money in now, save on that cost of what a funeral might cost or a plot in this particular case down the road. So those monies are invested and they're invested on your behalf. The difference is the funeral homes can pool that money with several funeral homes companies across the state, where the cemeteries actually have to have a trust for each individual company. And so you have multiple trusts, multiple tax returns, multiple trust management fees that the cemeteries have to pay that the funeral homes do not. This legislation just allows them to pool those trust funds so they can save that cost.
Representative Towns.
So let me see if I got it. Okay. 10 funeral homes, 10 different trusts. This bill will eliminate the necessity for 10 different trusts, 10 different fees and all that stuff, right?
Sponsor.
As it relates to cemeteries, you're exactly right.
Right.
Representative Towns.
Now, how do we guarantee that money is going to be taken care of, it's going to be safe when it's time for you to take a dirt nap and that the money's going to be there?
Mr. Sponsor.
It's a heavily regulated area. I'd also bring quite frequently on behalf of the Bankers Association, the trust legislation. I actually, in my law practice, do trust work. So this field is heavily regulated. The funeral home or the cemetery in this particular instance can't run off of the money. It's not their money.
Right.
It is actually the trust money for the designated beneficiary, which is usually the person purchasing the pre-need plot at the cemetery. It is their money.
All right, Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Now, and I've heard of this where people have paid their money. And I think it's a good idea because everything goes up. Highway costs, funeral costs, everything goes up. Groceries, everything goes up. So when that comes, the records, are there backups on the records? So in other words, if you and your family or some others pay pre-need and hey, maybe 40 years from now, how do we ensure those records are there and backed up in case something happens? Okay.
Representative Garrett.
They're audited every year. So these funds are tracked as they're kept in trust.
Okay.
So it's not like 1 year after a year, they can just disappear. There's a process to make sure those funds are protected for the beneficiaries of the trust.
Last one, Representative Towns. We've got
Chairman.
a heavy agenda today.
No problem, Mr. Chairman. This is the deal that I'm speaking more to is the name of the person. How, just say I'm 20 years old and my mom or dad did this, okay? 45 years later, hey, they transition. So how do I make sure that their names are in this deal? Not the money, the name of the individual that paid for it. How do we make sure that happens?
Mr. Sponsor.
That is governed by the provisions of the trust agreement that you enter into. You're entering into an agreement with the cemetery that allows the trust money to be invested. You are technically the trustee while you're alive. You get to appoint the trustee that succeeds you at the moment you die. That trustee is responsible for the funds to the funeral home that can pay for whatever plot or whatever you purchased from the cemetery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you, sir. Marie, what I'm alluding to is we have a presentation following our calendar
I got you.
today. Representative Calfee, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sponsor, how does this affect the little church cemeteries and little family cemeteries and such out in the country like where I live? I think I've only got in my 2 counties, I think I've only got 2 for-profit cemeteries. So how does it affect the ones that I was at Saturday for a ceremony for my cousin?
Representative Garrett.
If they have an active business that would promote and sell the cemetery, then they would be, this would help them if they charge for a pre-need cemetery plot. A lot of churches do that, for free or for their members of the church. It just depends on if their cemetery is an actually active entity that's a for-profit entity for their cemetery. So if they are qualified under that particular statute, then this would actually benefit them if they indeed take their cemetery plots on a pre-need basis so they can save the cost of creating and maintaining all these separate trusts. So it would benefit them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir. And from my understanding of the bill is this allows us to scale smaller entities to scale up, basically provide a larger corpus that would be hopefully have better investment returns and easier to manage and maybe get better management fees.
That's right.
Did I hear the question on this bill? Thank you, Representative. I heard the question called. All those in favor of House Bill 2352, moving on to Calendar and Rules, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. You, sir, are headed to Calendar and Rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee.
All righty. Thank you. And last bill we'll hear today is going to be from Representative Tandy Darby. Excuse me, I mispronounced that. I'm sorry, Representative Darby. He's here to discuss 2315 with us today. We've got a motion and a second. Representative Darby, always a pleasure. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, and please excuse me on my tardiness. This is a great bill that will allow that will allow permission from the Tennessee Public Utility Commission for investor-owned natural gas companies to come to the table and ask the TPUC for approval of these innovative natural gas resources. In this bill, they're capturing excess methane from sources around us, everything from farm waste to human waste and even landfill gas. They can utilize these sources while helping to remedy community nuisances. This is a win-win bill. And I stand ready for questions.
While it's a win-win, you just don't want to be downwind, correct?
Correct.
All righty. Thank you, and tip your waiters and waitresses. All righty. I heard the question on this bill. All those in favor of moving House Bill 2315 out to Calhoun Rules, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, you're off to Calhoun Rules. Representative Darby.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
All righty. That concludes today's calendar. We're not going to adjourn, though. We're going to hear from our friends at Labor and Workforce going to talk about some situations there have run into with regards to the implementation of our unemployment indexing bill we passed last year. I met with these fine folks in my office, and I thought that it might be interesting for the balance of our committee to also hear some of their concerns about implementation. So with that, we're going to go out of order for a moment. Let Commissioner and all others here with him today talk with us and share their heart with us. So with that, we're now out of session. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Sure, Chairman. My name is Jeff McCord, Commissioner of Labor and Workforce Development, and you do not want me to share my heart in public at this particular time, so I'm going to hold off on that, but why don't I let the others introduce themselves as well?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Stephanie Dedman, and I'm the Chief Information Officer with the Department of Finance and Administration.
Thank you, Chairman. Maydad Cohen from Gartner Consulting, Managing Partner. Thank you.
So, Chairman, and committee, I'm going to set context and then try to be as quiet as possible after that and let these two folks speak. As you know, pre-pandemic, we were moving towards a system upgrade, advancing the technology. We knew we needed to do it, and then we had the pandemic. And so we're on that path again. And the previous system that we implemented did not go as well as we would have wanted. As a matter of fact, we received a single audit finding for rushing that system before it was ready. And so we got to do better this time. And our primary and focus is on doing it right and making it happen right. At the same time, we know that we have an indexing bill, and basically that ties unemployment benefits to unemployment rate, which makes sense, and it's aimed at getting folks off unemployment and working, which is what the department is designed to do and focused to do. And our intent, our desire would be to marry those two, the implementation of new system, and when it comes online, it will have the indexing associated with it. So that's where we want to share some information for you today, where and there's no reason not for us to show our cards that we've learned in conjunction with our partners in STS. And let me say this, we have partnered strongly with our information technology group this go round to make sure this project is a success, and they have partnered as well to do the same. So with that, I will hand it over to our CIO for the state of Tennessee, Stephanie Dedman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a little bit of history of how we got to today and why Maydad with Gartner is here with us. Many of you are probably familiar with our Information Systems Council. Chairman Hazelwood and Chairman Lynn are both members of that. It's a legislative group that meets every other month to review some of our key IT projects, our IT strategy, some of our policies. So basically a legislative group that includes some other leaders to make sure we're on track and we're investing our dollars wisely and doing what we need to for success for our IT projects. Several months ago, we were sort of asked to we had some challenging projects and asked to consider some possible improvements. And one of our suggestions was that at the front end for our larger projects, 10 million and above of estimated cost, that we bring in a consulting company to do a upfront analysis of our approach, our procurement, how we plan to plan to procure the services. Have we properly identified the risks? Have we mapped out a reasonable schedule? Do we have the right participants involved? All of those things that are key to success of a large IT project. And so Gartner, which you'll hear from a little bit, Gartner is a leading industry consulting company that does research as well as services in the technology arena. And we already had an existing contract with Gartner to provide similar services. And so we actually thought that it would be a good pilot test to have Gartner do that review for the unemployment insurance procurements, of which there are 2. And so we talked to the department. They were very willing and agreed that that was a good approach to help us make sure we design the procurement effectively and have the best chance for success. And so we did a statement of work with Gartner, and they have reviewed, spent some time with our team, our collective teams with the Department of Labor and STS to review the procurement and give us some recommendations about the effort. So that's sort of the history that got us to today and why we wanted to share the information from Gartner's review of the procurements. So I'll turn it over to Maydad. Maydad has worked with us on this for several months, and we'll go through his presentation.
All right, thank you. Please let me know if you've got any questions throughout. A quick review of the Gartner team. I may be the representative here today, but there was a nice team behind this endeavor. My background, so you know, is I spent 7 years in state government. I was the chief of staff to the Secretary of Labor about 10 years ago, and we underwent a 5-year UI modernization project. So I lived it. I was a labor and employment lawyer before that, before joining state government. I went on to become the deputy chief of staff to the governor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, working on some very large transformational projects. And what Stephanie described as the partnership here between IT and the department has been phenomenal. I'll tell you a little bit about Gartner, but we do work across the United States and globally with governments. And one of the top failures we see is that lack of coordination. And I have to say, in the state of Tennessee, what we've seen with the Department of Labor on this project has been a very nice collaboration. And the earlier you collaborate between the two, the higher likelihood of success of these projects. The other 2 individuals who are part of our team, Keith Scott's got a history of consulting for large companies like Deloitte. He had started his own company for a number of years and then joined Gartner. He's based out of Atlanta, and then Hannah Lee has been a great partner. She's also based out of our Atlanta office. A little bit about Gartner. Most people don't know. We are the world's largest research and advisory company. $4 billion in revenue, over 17,000 employees across the world. We are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Our ticker is actually IT. Gives you a sense of how important IT is. We were always founded on IT research and advisory services. It's really in our blood. It's what we do. And then within Gartner, we have very small but nice boutique consulting division, and that's where we sit, and we kind of wrap our consulting services along with the research product that we provide globally. So when we came in, I always like to start at the end so that we're not hiding the conclusion. Our executive summary is really around the 4 key conclusions that we reached in our review, and that was that the state had a modernization priority for UI, and that it was really trying to find the best way forward, balancing the needs of businesses, claimants, and stakeholders, that there was a desire to ensure that the experience of applying for unemployment and on the business side of paying your taxes and going through a case was maintained, and that the project risk was controlled. And those were the 3 major balancing acts that were required. The second piece here is the hardest message to send to states, and I deal with a lot of state unemployment agencies. There are no perfect solutions out there. It's a hard conclusion to reach, but that's where we are today. There's technology has come a long way. There are really good options, and there are decisions that the state gets to make around pros and cons of different levers that result in better decisions around technology. But if there were a perfect solution, all 50 states would have implemented it. The reason there's no perfect solutions is that UI is a complicated federal-state partnership where, in the 1930s when the program was set up, it's set up basically just a floor with a little bit of management on top. And the intent was always to let states control how, through the legislature, allow states to create laws, policies, and rules around the unemployment system. As a result, UI across the U.S. is very different state to state. And that's why there are no perfect solutions for where states need to go. It's also why they are complicated IT systems that generally take a minimum of 18 to 24 months and usually longer to implement and implement right. I think the chairman mentioned one of the other big risks we see with UI systems across the country is rushed. This is not true just of UI. This is actually true of most UI systems. A rushed implementation tends to result, just like any rushed decision making, tends not to make for the best decisions when you're rushed, and that we do see UI failures tend to have rushed projects behind them. There was a lot of discussion we had with the state around, as you know, UI has a tax component where employers, pay for the UI tax side, and then a benefits or claimants component. We had a lot of discussions around the order of release and how those two play together. The state was considering different options, and through our discussions with them, I think came to a really good conclusion around releasing the benefits RFP first. That's currently out right now with proposals actually due at the end of this month. And then that will be followed pretty quickly by the RFP for the tax system. The reason to think about that, I often talk about UI systems as buying a house. You'll hear I'll get into the analogy of the foundation of the house, because you want to build a house on top of a solid foundation. The way to think about the benefits and tax procurements is you don't want to do them at the same time. That would be like building a house and building an addition at the same time. You'd want the two to be able to, if you're going to buy if you're going to use an architect for the add-on, you're going to want to know who's building your first, your house first. And so the concept was to stagger the two, ensure that you release the benefits RFP because that was the important one. Get that awarded. And once that's awarded, you'll be able to issue the tax RFP pretty quickly. That's a faster implementation, so it should catch up when they work in tandem. So it's not a stagger where you have to go only do one at a time, but it is staggered so that you really control your IT risk. And this was one of the really nice benefits of having STS sit with labor. There was an understanding and discussion of the ability to discuss the operational needs and then the IT risks of what happens when you try to go two procurements at the exact same time. There's what we would call an integration risk of those two systems talking to each other. And so the staggered approach allows you to manage that risk, but still compress the timeline. So that was a really nice example of collaboration between the two. And then readiness. We talk a lot about agency readiness to take on these large projects. So I talked a lot about the failure to collaborate between IT and labor, rushed decision making. The third pillar of why IT projects struggle is agency. And this is, by the way, this is not just a public sector problem. We see this in the commercial sector just as much. Readiness to work with large, and 10 million is the right threshold for large IT projects. And readiness means understanding the product that you're buying, your governance of the IT system and the work ahead of you, These projects become complicated because of things like technical issues like integration, how two systems talk to each other. They also become complicated with things like data migration. So you have a lot of data in the system today. You need to move all that data from one place to the other. Before I got into IT, I thought that was simple. I learned the hard way that it's not. It's very complicated. When you move systems from one vendor to another, the data isn't structured the same way. It's not defined the same way. So it's not as easy as just trying to build a pipe and sending all the data from one place to the other. It tends to not work very well. And so those are the types of things where when we work with states, we recommend a strong readiness component where the state does a lot of its own work to set up governance, to set up getting ready for this work, and what we call change management. Change is hard in any organization. And that also means that when you get a new system, you also have to do a lot of training on that new system, both internally and externally, because you've got businesses now using a new system, you've got claimants applying through a new system. There's a communication and a change management component that we often see states miss. And so you could have a really nice system, but if you haven't thought about what we call adoption, communication, and change management, that often still fails. And so the state, to their credit, is doing a lot of work starting to think about those things. So as a result of our work together, we kind of created these 6 strategic principles with the state. A lot of them will match what I just walked through. We like to use strategic principles. Sometimes it feels very consultancy, but I've learned, having been on the state side, getting consulted, I didn't always like them. But I have to say, there's a benefit to having these strategic principles because they're consensus-built concepts that allow you to return back to them and use them in your as you build. Yes, Chairman.
And if I might today, we're sure that you're great at your job and you've done all the things we do, but frankly, we're not here to hear about that. We're here to cut to the bottom line.
Let's do it.
We just please give us our message, but while we still have some members here, please, sir.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the bottom line is these benefits systems are large and complicated IT systems. They take a minimum, at the fastest, 18 to 24 months to be implemented. This is the roadmap that we created that we think is the most realistic. It's appropriately balanced with being aggressive, but it is balanced in terms of ensuring protecting risk and ensuring that the same problems don't reoccur, both other projects in this state and in others. And so you see where we are today. The benefits RFP, like I mentioned, is out and ready to receive responses. That's going to be followed quickly with the tax RFP. And then you can see the benefits implementation goes for that 18 to 24 month period. There's an initial go live, and then there's kind of the full go live. And that allows you that balance of ensuring you're not risking going live too early, but you can go live quickly enough with components that really get the state moving in the right direction. You can also see, to your point, Chairman, about getting to the point, the statute effective date right now is before go live. So the indexing is a great example of the state having the authority to provide laws and direction to the agency. That has to get implemented in a system. Those implementations can get complicated. The system that the state wants is a really good one for purposes of what we would call configuration and being able to make those types of changes the way you'd want them. But we believe today, based on the timeline, the products in the market, and the level of risk, that you will not be going live with a new system in time to implement the indexing law at the date that's currently set in the statute.
All righty. So to shuck this down to the cob, is we wanted the department to make a change that would benefit Tennessee substantially financially with regards to the savings to the system. You don't think that it can be implemented in time is using the current methodology or whatever, you're exacting very detailed, thorough consideration of many issues. Your study, we're having a disagreement with regards to when we want to see the work done and when you believe it can be done. That's what we're talking about.
That's the crux of it.
Okay. And again, our bill had substantial financial reward to the state with regards to cost savings. Has that been factored into any of this process? Because what it sounds like is that for those of us who run private businesses, it sounds like we're getting governmented here. You know, that it's like,
Chairman,
okay, we're still going to be here tomorrow. Let's make this, we can wait another week, we can wait another month because we're going to get paid taxes regardless. And so here we are. Well, let's just make this a long-term project. And consultants, me being one, we like long-term projects and long performance milestones, and everything that's both lucrative and easier to achieve. So I'm seeing where there's a little bit of a disconnect between what this body has decided they wanted and maybe the vendor community is out there saying, I understand we have to listen to them because they are the experts. But I've also known that I had a real smart man tell me one time, he said, you need a good lawyer and you need a good accountant, but you don't need to let either one of them run your business. And so that's kind of where I am on this, is like, where there has to be some accommodation somewhere, either some compression of milestones, or there's got to be a situation where we put duct tape and baling wire on our existing system in order to generate these savings that we have seen brought about. So I'm trying to figure out what way we need to go. Commissioner.
So if I may, we do not disagree on we need to do this as fast as possible. Compressing milestones is certainly a way to do it, but you increase your risk. And from my perspective, from the department's perspective, is that we've been down this road before where we compress milestones. And Gartner has no dog in this fight. They're a research firm who we wanted to know, our STS wanted to know, what's our best picture if we manage our risk and be as aggressive as we possibly can. And we're sharing that information, Chairman. And yes, there is a backup plan where we could work with our current vendor to implement, and we've already started that. What that does is put both projects at risk. I mean, it increases your risk. And so we've already started that backup plan to do that while we try to do this system the most aggressive in the right way as we possibly can. I do have you got to be careful when somebody points to their previous experience, but my previous experience is a lot in IT with a Fortune 500 company. So none of this is governmented. A lot of this is implementing a very complex system the right way that has to be integrated in all the workforce programs that they migrated. There's just a lot to this complex system. And I don't think we're going to get another chance to do this right for a long time. So we really want to do it certainly as fast as we can, but the right way. Otherwise, we're going to be paying those costs on the back end.
All righty. Well, it sounds like we've got some bridges to cross, don't we? Representative Towns, you had a question, and then we're going to go to Representative Briggins. We're going to Representative Sparks.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with what you were saying, and thank you all, obviously, for your presentation. But the deal of it is that, let's say this was the U.S. military, and I would think that we would be able to find the talent somewhere in the country or somewhere in the world that could help us expedite our mission accurately, precisely, and preferably, within budget, by going out and finding those people. What is the challenge? Is it finding the people? Or is the technology has to be reconfigured? What are the challenges? Tell me what the three or four challenges are.
So Maydad's better, or Stephanie's better able to answer that than I.
I'll start. Thank you for the question. There are companies who already have this software, so we're not we're not building it from the ground up. So it's not as simply as just throwing a lot of bodies at it. I think there are companies who may tell us that they can do it in the time frame. We're basing this on looking at other states comparatively, and how long it took them to implement, and where they hit issues, and had they sometimes when you have to go slow to go fast. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but the issue here is that when we look at other states, the timeframes have been longer because of the complexity of the benefit side to configure it. It's not take it out of the box. The tax side is a little bit different. It's a lot of configuration and potentially custom development based on the laws in our state. But I'll let Maydad add to that. Sorry.
Yeah, Representative, I think that's an excellent question. I would support what Stephanie just said and then add the other complexity is unemployment insurance expertise is incredibly limited around the country. The staff at the Department of Labor that I've had a chance to work with have been amazing, but they're stretched thin. And so you need that state experience and expertise to be part of this. And so if you divide them into too many projects at the same time, that's when you begin to introduce that level of risk. So that's the issue, is that there's not enough state expertise around UI.
Representative Towns, I'm going to give you a follow-up, then I'm going to hit some other folks.
Okay,
after
Mr.
this.
Chairman, thank you, sir. The expertise, that to me would mean that we would have to hire some other people, okay, and get them in the hopper to do whatever's necessary, because we're trying to do a system in a timely manner so that our customers, the 5, 7, however many millions of people in the state of Tennessee, are taken care of. This last episode with unemployment insurance, trying to get it taken care of, was horrible for us. And I mean, we're the members, and rightfully so, the people are supposed to, come to us, try to get this thing done. And it's been challenging. I know the department is doing the best it could at certain circumstances, but we definitely don't want to see it again. And we don't know what's around the corner. But I mean, it was absolutely excruciating to get people the necessary resources to take care of their livelihood, their lives, okay? And so whatever y'all are doing, I'm hoping this will address that and rectify that, because it's not good to be on the other end. And people are crying, people are dying, for real, literally, okay? And so we have to figure out, if there's more people, let us know. If it's technology somewhere, we have to go find it and get it done, because people really were fighting for their lives. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Towns. One of my personal frustrations with this is the fact that when we implemented this bill, it's been almost a year now, and so a year later, we're being told we need more time, and that to me is a little bit doesn't speak to a sense of urgency anywhere in and of the process. We could build the building. We could build several buildings to house these within the time frame that you're pointing out here, and there's not a supply chain issue that's for coding. So it seems as if there is an intensely deliberative process being presented here that says, because we want to use this intensely deliberative process, we don't have time, but here we are, we've already burned a year. And so I don't have much sympathy for that, candidly. That's just kind of the way I see things. Representative Brickens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You kind of clarified something. I thought it was 2 years ago that we authorized the funding for this, and last year we went to the indexing. Is that the correct? So we knew this was on the table 2 years ago. So, and what was the targeted implementation date upon the legislation? What date was that?
The end of 2023, December 2023.
Okay. All right. And the other thing for clarification, you have RFPs out right now, and how many vendors do you think will submit proposals?
I think we received 8 or 10 letters of intent to bid, 13. So that tells us they intend to bid. We could get down to when they're actually due, and we get 6 or 7.
And as part of the time concern, once you get those proposals, is procurement and is there any way to expedite that leg of the decision somehow?
We have been working on that with with the Central Procurement Office to expedite the process, and now we're probably weeks away from a first award. So we have looked at that schedule and tried to compress as we've gone through. So we're almost through that part of it. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Representative Sparks.
Yeah, real quick. Thank you, Dr. McCord, for your time. It's a serious issue. Sadly, many of our members have already left out. I was talking to a university president a while back. I won't say who, but sharp guy. And I said, man, this workforce development, unemployment, I mean, just the next generation, to me, it's almost going to be a national security crisis if we can't get people to want to go to work. I want to ask you the 2.6 rate in my county, Rutherford, how accurate do you think that rate is?
Well, it's accurate, but it's not seasonally adjusted, sir. So the the data doesn't break down seasonally adjusted per county. We can do that per state. But no, very accurate. I think the thing that you need to realize, though, that we need to realize is that's a percentage of the people in the workforce.
Okay.
And so our drive is to drive more people in the workforce. That
Yes, sir.
singular metric there is good, but it's incomplete if you don't look at the workforce participation rate alongside of it, because you can have a much better situation with a higher unemployment rate if your workforce participation rate's higher.
Yes, sir. Well, how do we reach, we were in finance the other day, Commissioner Brad Turner with Department of Intellectual Developmental Disabilities made a great quote. I love this quote. He said, there's dignity in working.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dealing with special needs folks that have a lot of heart and passion to work. And I appreciate our chairman here, his passion for really making a difference for the future. But I mean, I have a lot of fear of going forward for the future. And I've seen the great work that y'all have done. Y'all helped me with the job fair years ago, had the bus come in. We had 360 people come through, hungry, wanting a job. If we'd done that today, I doubt if we'd get 12 people. I hate to say that, but I don't know why times are changing. But how do we reach this next generation with, I guess, creating, when I was growing up, it was like, you were excited to have a job. You were excited to go to work. What advice would you give lawmakers to how we change this paradigm?
So the key to what you just said is the strategy that education's on in conjunction with labor is our work-based learning programs in high school, 16 or 17-year-olds, introducing them to work.
Yes, sir.
While we have them. And it's amazing all the good things happen when a young person has a job and all the bad things that don't. And that's understanding that when you go and all the stuff you learn, the spring in your step you get, the dignity of work, introducing to work is something that's a part of the state's efforts. And there's several other ones I'd love to come talk to you about that we're working on. But to that particular point with young people, that is the effort being pursued heavily, is that work-based learning.
I knew we could get you to share your heart today, Commissioner. We just had to dig a little bit. So, Leader Camper, you're up next. And
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for this presentation. I think that for years, STS have been charged with getting all of our departments up to speed. And they had an aggressive plan. I remember hearing all in budget, securing the funds and getting the updates. And each department had a phased approach of how we were going to do this. And I believe you've done a great job. We followed it along the way. But what also happened in that process is the legislature passed some bills along the way that had a huge impact on what you were doing. So to me, I'm applauding the fact that you went outside of yourself to seek the advice, guidance, direction, research of a world leader like this organization here to come in and give us an assessment, tell us where we are, let them know where we're going, and try to give us a direction of how to get there. Now we can take this information now and put it into our own plans. Not saying we got to go step by step with what they're recommending, but I think I'm okay with the fact that you're here telling us the ground truth on where we are because we need to know that. But like I said, I think you've been doing a good job. Look forward to where we're going to go with this. And sometimes, you know, you have to slow down to get it right. And getting it right sometimes outweigh this fiscal impact that we believe we're going to receive at the end. I mean, times are all right now, so maybe it's okay to take a little bit more time. But I think sometimes you have to slow down to get it right. And so we interjected ourselves in the situation. It put a little wrinkle in it, but I do think that reaching out to Gartner to advise us, guide us, direct us, do the research was a good thing. So I'm glad to hear the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Representative Towns, take us home.
And I will, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. First thing I want to do is thank all the members for the questions that you asked, because I learned a lot coming from each of you all today, especially you today, Mr. Chairman. Not only that, my colleague Sparks asked the questions about, how do we get young people to work, da-da-da-da-da-da. When I was a kid, we had summer jobs, okay? And every year I try to introduce something so cities can actually pay kids to work during the summertime. You have to get that first job. You have to get that first job somewhere to get started, okay? And finally, what I'd ask you all, when you're going out doing these RFPs, do you put any performance penalties on these guys if they don't meet their deadlines?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Are they harsh, strong penalties? I'm not talking about that.
I think
Real money.
we try to, yes. We work with the CPO on, the risk. Sometimes when you put too much in the contract, it increases the cost. And so it's an insurance or, pay me now or pay me later. But yes, we do look at performance penalties and in terms of dollars. And so we do normally put those in our contracts.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
All righty. Thank you. And I appreciate y'all coming forward today. I'm like I said earlier, this message a year later, somewhat, frankly, it doesn't sit well. The fact that we're saying, hey, we've spent our year coming up with an explanation on why we don't have enough time, as opposed to that, to me, and it may be oversimplifying things, but that's what the message that is being taken in is. And so I would challenge y'all to go back and I'm not going to use the coined phrase, redouble your efforts, because I don't every time I hear that, it's like, what? But relook at it and see if we cannot get some type of expedition throughout this process, and recognizing the need for urgency that we have here. And I understand that once you lay this card on the table, it's one of those where it's an absolution, because you can say, if you had followed our guidance, if there's any problem, it's like buying an insurance policy for the department. It's like, hey, we told you. And so from that standpoint, I would encourage you to, you've checked that box today. Now, please go out and let's get this thing implemented as quickly as possible. That would be my message today. But I do appreciate y'all coming and sharing with us, because I felt like it was important that all of our members heard your message. And for those who weren't here, shame on them. All righty, we're going to go back in session, and thank you all very much. We are adjourned.